Now to an action by the President of the United States that would have until recently seemed unthinkable. Today, the President of the United States once again embraced the message of racist, bigoted bullies. Today, he did it by deciding to retweet 3 violent, disturbing videos seeming to show radical Islamists in Egypt beating and killing people. Another video showed someone attacking a statue of the Virgin Mary. A third video allegedly showed a migrant assaulting a disabled youth in the Netherlands. Now, the president retweeted these videos from the Twitter account of the deputy leader of an extreme far-right group in England called Britain First. Last year, the leader of that group was convicted of religiously aggravated harassment for verbally abusing a Muslim woman wearing hijab. Given some of this president's words and deeds in just the past year, it might seem normal for him to embrace the hate propaganda from a British extremist group. It might seem normal, but it is not. It is easy to become numb to this sort of behavior, but we must not. Presidents of the United States are not supposed to stoke fear and hatred of Muslims. That's what these videos, some of which appear real, are designed to do. That's what this group, Britain First, tries to do, spreading that message to their tens of thousands of Twitter followers. And today, the President of the United States thought it a good idea to forward that message 3 times to his tens of millions of Twitter followers, retweeting hate propaganda from a far-right extremist group based in another country. White supremacist David Duke, by the way, was thrilled. Thank God for Trump, he tweeted. Britain's Prime Minister Theresa May, through a spokeswoman, says the president was wrong. Quote, Britain First seeks to divide communities through their use of hateful narratives which peddle lies and stoke tensions, she said through the spokesperson. They cause anxiety to law-abiding people. British people overwhelmingly reject the prejudiced rhetoric of the far right, which is the antithesis of the values that this country represents: decency, tolerance, and respect. By the way, the video purporting to show a migrant beating up a Dutch boy on crutches was not a migrant. He's a Dutch citizen. Facts do matter, the Dutch embassy tweeted to the president. Do they matter to the White House spokesperson, Sarah Sanders? Well, here's what she said.
Whether it's a real video, the threat is real, and that is what the president is talking about. That's what the president is focused on, is dealing with those real threats, and those are real no matter how you look at it.
Yeah, whether it's real or not, doesn't really matter. The president just tweeted again at Britain's prime minister, tweeting, Theresa May, don't focus on me. Focus on the destructive radical Islamic terrorism that is taking place within the United Kingdom. We are doing just fine. He initially tweeted, by the way, at the wrong Theresa May, got the wrong Twitter account, then retweeted to the correct one. Bottom line, though extremism of any sort is a threat, radical Islamists are a threat. The radical right are a threat as well. Last year, Jo Cox, a member of British Parliament and an outspoken supporter of immigration, was murdered by a man reportedly shouting Britain First as he shot and stabbed her. I spoke with Jo Cox's husband, Brendan, shortly before airtime. Mr. Cox, first off, I just wondered what went through your mind when you read this retweet from President Trump this morning?
I think we've probably got used to a degree of absurdity, of outrageous retweets and tweets from the president, but I think this felt like it was a different order. Here he was retweeting a felon, somebody that was convicted of religiously aggravated harassment of an organisation that is a hate-driven organisation on the extreme fringes, the far right of British politics. This is like the president retweeting the Ku Klux Klan. This is not a mainstream organisation. For the president of the United States, our greatest ally as a country, to be retweeting, to be providing a microphone to those voices, I think everybody, no matter what your political persuasion in the UK, I think has been shocked by that.
And in fact, not just provided a microphone, I mean, it really has amplified those voices. I looked, the woman who he retweeted has some 40-some thousand followers on Twitter. The president has, 40 million or whatever the exact number is.
Exactly, and the reason this matters is that these words, these narratives have impact. We live in a society where people decide what they do on the basis of what they think is socially acceptable. And when you make hatred like this against a minority, whether it is Jews or Muslims or whatever else, when you make hatred like this normalized, when you retweet and endorse an organization like this, what that does is it changes people's views of what is acceptable. It means that people are more open about their hatred. It means they're more likely to act on their hatred, to One of the things that we often talk about in the aftermath of an Islamist-inspired terror attack is who are the hate preachers, who are the people that are feeding this cancer of hatred in our societies, and we should ask exactly those same questions on the far right. And these people are the people who are inciting attacks against minorities, and the president has just been providing them a microphone.
Yeah, I mean, this group, Britain First, which I think many people in the United States have not heard about, I mean, the man, as far as I understand, who murdered your wife actually shouted Britain First as he shot and stabbed her.
It's also true that the forthcoming trial in the UK of a suspected terrorist who mowed down, using a van, a group of Muslims outside a mosque was also a follower of theirs. So this organisation is one that has very strong connections to violence. It's an organisation on the far extremes of politics. And, for a country, for a president to be legitimising these voices, it has real impact. This isn't a hypothetical. This isn't something which is just a tweet here or a tweet there. It's something that the president has had an impact on and therefore changed the public discourse in our country for the worse.
So when the White House press secretary, Sarah Sanders, defends the president's retweet, saying that he did it to, quote, start a conversation about border security and immigration, does that make any sense to you?
No. I think it is an absurd justification. I mean, I'm sure she has the hardest job of anybody in the world, but I think even in the list of desperate attempts to defend something that was indefensible, this was a pretty pathetic attempt at doing so.
This is the first time that we've spoken. Can you just tell us about Jo? I mean, she stood up against this kind of hatred and was killed for it.
Yeah, Jo was somebody who had spent her life in humanitarian work around the world as an aid worker for humanitarian aid organisations. She'd worked in Sudan, she'd worked in the aftermath of the tsunami, she'd worked in earthquakes, and she decided that her calling took her into politics, and it was that humanitarian calling, and she spent a lot of her time working on the conflict in Syria, working on loneliness in her own constituency. She was as worried as anyone about the impact of our communities falling apart. And she would have been, if she were still here, as outraged, I think, as anybody that the president, with whom we should have an incredibly close relationship, is actively undermining our cohesion as a country, is actively supporting the group, this extremist group. I think should be horrified by it.
Is there anything else you want to tell people in the United States?
I think, the relationship between the UK and the US is incredibly important, and this president is undermining it, and frankly the stature with which the US is seen, and that is awful. For those of us who care about this, it's a damage which goes on every single day and eats away at the relationship and the prestige with which the presidency and to an extent the US is held. Now, I think our relationship will outlast this president, but in the meantime we're left with somebody who is not just doing this by accident. These tweets are not a mistake, they are a strategy. And he's done it with anti-Semitic memes around Hillary Clinton. He's done it following the Charlottesville neo-Nazi marches. And he has done it in the campaign against Mexicans and Muslims and migrants. And that hatred has no place in our society. Of course, we can disagree about the role of Islam in society. We can disagree about immigration. We should be able to disagree about all of these things and still say that hatred has no part in our society. This president has become a purveyor of hate, and it's time that we all said that enough is enough, and we won't tolerate that no matter what our political disagreement.